Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for taking the time from your weekend. Vivek and I here in our first session for the next 1 hour that you'll spend with us. Hope to make this fairly engaging and fruitful overview for you with regards to how the application tracking systems work, as well as how can you most effectively work on a resume that is going to help you in your next job move. With this, I would like to hand it over to Vivek to take you through the first segment of the session.
Thank you, Monica. Good morning, everyone. And once again, thanks for taking your time out to attend this particular session. A bit of more, deep intro to this topic. We all have faced rejection as part of our job search. Not everyone who interviews gets the offer. We all know that. But do we know what else is part of a job search? Getting our resume discarded even before it reaches the recruiter. Our resumes, in general, whenever we apply for a job, is very likely to face off with an applicant tracking system, ATS. That's what it stands for, before it reaches the desk of any human recruiter. Even if a human recruiter has taken your application through emails or any other means, the first and foremost thing that a particular recruiter is going to do is upload it to an ATS, Applicant Tracking System. With that said, can we go, wanted to present some facts. Next slide, please. %98 of Fortune 500 companies use an ATS program when hiring new employees. Now, one of the things which it's not just Fortune 500 nowadays, it's almost everyone entirely, even in startups, the hiring, if we are starting hiring for startups at a small scale as well, as small as 10 to 15 people, people make the use of an ATS. So that's a stat that it's almost close to, not only 98% of Fortune 500, but 98% of all companies are using ATS right now. Next. 70% of the job applications gets disqualified by the ATS before it is being read. And we will get into details of why exactly this is happening. And this entire session is actually about this, of how to make sure that our resumes don't get disqualified by a machine before it reaches any human interaction. A job posting receives approximately 250 applications on an average. And out of those 250, only 4 or 6 applications will be contacted for an interview. So with that, next slide, please. So what exactly is this ATS? Who is this particular, what is this software which is rejecting our career, our history, what we have written in a particular file? So simply put, application tracking software can be considered as a resume filtering bots. Employers use the software to collect, scan, and rank all the applications which has been applied or which comes through for a particular application for a job. It was initially this whole concept of applicant tracking system came from the fact that when large companies started hiring in larger quantities, there needed to be a particular streamlined process of making sure that the hiring process is fair. The hiring process also, the manual labor which is involved in filtering out all the resumes, the exact same matches and all those things is reduced to a minimum. And that's what the starting point of this ATS systems came into existence. What exactly it does is it's already there. It collects, scans, and ranks, but it basically indexes our resumes, the content which we upload. It indexes those content. By indexing, I mean it figures out what are the keywords, what exactly have you written in your resume, and enables a full-fledged search capabilities on resumes for the recruiters. Next slide, please. Some more information of what exactly, how does an ATS work? And this is I will also add few technical details in upcoming slides, but overall, what happens is, think about it in a fashion that we are uploading a document, which is our resumes. Once it is uploaded, the resumes invariably have distinct sections. And what the ATS does, it immediately scores information such as your qualification, education, job titles, skills, and other relevant parameters, which are very, very and to a certain extent, I will also include job location and your current location as well. Just to ensure, there are algorithms which actually helps us in figuring out who are the nearest people to a particular job. And when I say nearest, it's not in kilometers. I'm talking about cities, nearby cities, and all those things. And what the ATS does is compare the resume and these parameters which has been extracted to the job description which is put up there. So can we go to the next slide, please? Once this particular information is extracted, what happens is it gets stored in a structured fashion. Now, if I have to tell ourselves that we have seen not only our resumes, but we have seen resumes from multiple sources, multiple people, and everyone has their unique style of writing resumes. Or even if you're copy pasting the template, the content of the resume is something which gets changed over and over again for a lot of other between people, segments of people. Now, what happens because of that is while once this particular information is extracted and stored in an ATS, it enables a full-fledged search. Now, if our content, if our keywords, if our use of right content, right way of writing, right chronological order of writing things, if it is not met, resumes, the information which gets extracted is done through some extraction softwares and all those things. A lot of ATSs have inbuilt extractor. A lot of ATSs and a lot of companies who are using ATSs, they use a third-party software to extract this information and store it. So all these things are in the end. What I'm trying to say is we are actually extracting all these things programmatically. All the information which gets extracted out of resume is done in a programmatic way. And hence that particular program is bound to, and it makes sense out of it, that if you have written Java, if you have written Python, if you have written JavaScript, if you have written React or some technologies like that, it actually catches that hey, these are qualified skills and known skills that this particular people have with them. All right. And what it enables, the ATS enables, is for a recruiter is actually once you have applied, your resume content is there, it is highly searchable. People who are applying for that job, the recruiter who is actually hiring for that particular job knows what keywords to search for in all these applications. And the moment you do a search, our search algorithms and everything ranks all this content of the resume in an ordered fashion of scores. That who's the best matching resume, which is the best matching resume, what comes next. And we are better off if this particular search results places our resume on top of everyone else, at least in top 50 or top 100 qualified applicants, as close a match to the job description as possible. Why is that? We all know that increases our probability of at least getting the first round of interview done. Now, slightly more insights into what exactly it works. I have used few of the keywords, things like it extracts the information. Now, I will actually use few of the facts from our own ATS at Talent 500, which is an in-house built product, which is being built and being developed. Even this extraction and everything is done through our proprietary AI algorithm, which essentially means that there is a whole process. The moment someone uploads the resume, there is an AI process which sits behind the scenes and extracts this information, makes sense out of it. Sense such as what are the key terms used in your resume? What exactly? So even if your job history, we figure out just by seeing the start date or the end date or a particular relevant time frame, that AI algorithm understands that what is the time duration you have spent on different jobs, which is very relevant in case you are trying to apply for slightly higher profile or even at any level, whatever. It shows how much experienced you are on a particular skill set. It extracts your qualification data and identifies that, hey, this means if you are putting a degree such as BTech or BE or BSc or BCA, any of these degrees, AI understands that this actually is schooling information or college information, and it stores at the right places. It understands the percentage and CPIs or CGPAs, whatever has been written, and it stores it. Whether it is used or not is a separate thing, but it does understand that once you have mentioned a particular degree, it will come with a particular performance of your how did you do, how good you did in your college. But yeah, more about that later. Finally, the entire section of name, the first intro paragraph which we have, which all resumes invariably have, actually we extract, the AI algorithm extracts that particular information of your address, your name, phone number, all those things gets extracted and stores it in a structured fashion. I laid emphasis on the thing that it's called as structured, because the data which we are getting, the resumes which we are getting are in different formats. The content is different. So we all consider, all this is considered as unstructured data. So we are getting a host of unstructured data, ATS with a proprietary AI, or at Talent 500, we have a proprietary AI. But even if we don't have a proprietary AI, all the ATSs are actually tied up with some form of this particular extraction tool. And what they do is exactly the same thing, extracts this information out and put it in a structured fashion for consumption by recruiters and for consumption in further down the processes inside ATS also. Now, and with this said, we have taken an example here that let's see what exactly and this particular aspect of ATS is related to the job matching and the candidate resume matching thing. Just wanted to bring to the notice that ATS is used for much wider functions as well. It's not just, this is the first and foremost step which makes or breaks the deal for candidate and for jobs of extraction and matching and scoring. But post that also, ATS is used for a lot of compliance-based tracking, making sure that our each and every the candidate communication when we do with external world, internal communication between recruiters, between hiring managers, all these things, scheduling of interviews, setting up of interviews, all these things are inside in a single product, which is ATS, till the point of generating an offer letter and releasing it from within our system. So all these are highly what I call a scalable and integratable thing, which is ATS, which resides there. And for anyone who is working on making an ATS, while it seems pretty straightforward that it's a form-based system where you upload something, you take it through various stages, so on and so forth, it's actually a pretty complex system to be built. And let us also acknowledge the fact that lot of jobs, not all, but a lot of jobs have very, very high traffic of applications. An example is one of our clients posted a data engineering job, and we received approximately 1,200 applications within the duration of 10 days. Now, it's humanly impossible to go through 1,200 resumes manually to figure out who are the best match. And that's where this ATS makes the first part of it, makes our life extremely simple. Again, I already touched upon that we extract information. That extraction, in more or less extracting content from a file is a pretty straightforward thing, but making sense out of that file is something which is more complex. In this particular case, ATS, what it does is it actually has the capability. ATS also provides you the option of creating and posting a job directly from ATS. The things which we see on career websites, the posting which we are seeing on LinkedIn for a particular job or somewhere else, or a lot of Naukri.com, wherever we are seeing this, those are promoted. Once you create a job inside ATS, those gets replicated to all these job boards and everything, where people start applying. Now, once you create a job has very specific sections, which is called as, the biggest section is job description. And you will always see inside a job description, there are two main areas: key responsibilities, roles and responsibilities, and key skills, minimum skills, which is necessary for applying to this job. And that's what our extractor, the AI or any other statistical or any other way, we figure out that a particular job description in the end is natural language, right? As in we have written, someone has written a paragraph about what you are going to do, what you're not going to do, or what exactly you will be privileged to. All those things have been written in a natural language, of natural way of speaking. Figuring out what exactly is what are the keywords of that particular thing is an entirely NLP based system which runs behind the system, which runs behind the scene and extracts informations like Java coding. In this particular example, the highlighted portion has few things like Java. We have taken a very generic specific, not very specific example, but a generic example that it actually extracts Java coding, 7+ years of experience, testing, communication skills, employer satisfaction from this particular paragraph. All these are important. Of course, as in even in this, like things like off and all those stop words, everything will be removed. So that does not make sense, right? And same if a resume says a specific information, like, if you go and see things like highly enthusiastic, the example which is written here on the deck, highly enthusiastic, solution-oriented professional with 7+ years of experience in Java coding. You see, even this goes through the same chain of algorithm to figure out, to understand that, hey, tell me, what exactly are the keywords which we can extract. And you see, we get this similar thing: Java, 7 years of experience, testing, employer satisfaction, communication skills. Now, it does extract analytical skills and project management, but once this information is put, think about it that it is stored against you as a bag of words or skill sets, that these are the skill sets which this candidate possesses. But for application to this job, minimum skill set required is on the left-hand side of our screen, which is Java coding and those things. It does match, like 5 parameters are matching in these 2 resumes. In that particular case, even that matching algorithm is a statistical model in which we, in which it tries to match and optimize that particular matching and comes up with a score. Someone with a 5 out of 5 match, that all the keywords have matched, will get a very, very high score in this particular aspect. When I say score, just think about it as a relative score, not exactly absolute that you get a 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, not like that. It's a relative. If there are 1,200 applications, amongst them, you are on the top 1% or top 2% kind of scoring, right? And what it helps us is figuring out, making the matches properly. So this particular candidate will definitely get a call back from someone someone who's behind this hiring. So the recruiter or the hiring manager, to take this particular thing forward. Another information is, while this may seem like, hey, this is jackpot, like, why don't we simply copy paste all the skills and requirements from a job description into our resume and apply with that resume? Just letting you know that I have clearly said that this is a statistical based AI models which are behind extraction and making sense out of this. We understand if you have written a particular, like, Java coding multiple times in your resume, the AI will normalize it. It will say, hey, this occurrence has happened more than n number of times, more than 3 times, 4 times. It means the importance of that word actually reduces to one thing, as good as mentioning it once. Just like if I keep mentioning my name, Vivek 10 times, you will understand, you normalize that, okay, you know that I am Vivek, kind of thing. So that's how you normalize it. Similarly, your years of experience, you may have written 7+ years of experience. Other way is we cross-validate it with the educational information, your work experience, which is posted there. And we use that information as well to cross-verify whatever is written there, and whichever comes closer gets a match. So with that said, I think I have covered what exactly how ATS works. It extracts it. Quickly summarizing, it extracts information from both the job description and the candidate resumes. It marks all the keywords, gets all the keywords which is necessary for this job, matches the job keywords to the candidate keywords, which has been done, and scores the candidate's applications to in an order of relevance, which gets a highest closing matching resume to this particular job description in a descending order of the score. With that said, can we go to the next slide, please? I will hand it over to Monica to run us through with how to make an ATS friendly resume, so that we don't lose out on the initial thing that our resume gets deselected right at the ATS itself. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you, Vivek. As we get into this section, of course, I wanted to kind of just step a little back, and typically, as any of us is looking at moving jobs or looking at exploring what's next for oneself, you kind of stack things that are necessary for you to start the job hunt, and typically it starts with thinking about the organizations that potentially you would want to which are part of your desired list of companies, or which most associate to the kind of work that you want to do next. And then the very next moment, it's about putting together a resume. Oftentimes, one hasn't necessarily updated it. And that becomes like literally the first thing. And with everything that we know from what Vivek kind of spoke to us about so far, many a time the assumption at a candidate level could be that it's really a recruiter that is going to first attend to your resume, and in many shape and form, that's the intent with which the resume building activity kind of starts off. But as you know, majority, about 75% of recruiters today use either application tracking system or a similar tool that helps them kind of sieve through the multiple applications that they tend to get around any job opportunity that's posted. Now, from a resume making point of view, there are, of course, umpteen number of formats that you will find if you just Google that aspect. There are umpteen organizations today that are helping or aiding resume making to professionals, both technology and otherwise. But it really is, what I'm going to focus on today is more around what makes sense when it comes to an application tracking system being the first filter in many ways, and which kind of continues to stand optimal when it comes to also eventually a human recruiter kind of looking at your resume and taking that forward. Right. With that, let's move on to the next segment, and next slide, please. Of course, as is the case with anything that you do, it's important that you start from the basics. And for that, the most recommended aspect is to follow a simple structure and do not get into too much complications. As we go into the next slide now, we'll walk you through, what typically a resume looks like. Many of you either would have been recommended or you would have seen the often used format that if you Google out is what is on the left side of your screens. And here what you'll see is there is a fairly well pronounced picture. There is significant amount of color that's used. There is varied kinds of fonts that have been used. There are multiple sections in terms of how the resume is divided. But when when an ATS, for instance, as a resultant application coming through an ATS is looking at this resume, it would be what you will see on your right side of the screen, which is basically a text format. Right, and the most relevant information, as Vivek kind of spoke to you through what an ATS is really looking at in your resume and which sections of your resume does this information basically get extracted, right? So here is a few recommendations, which is to kind of stick to certain basic elements of what you will keep or do in the resume. It's okay to carry a picture possibly on the resume, but kind of not necessarily the amount of space that this picture here is occupying, because the ATSs will not necessarily use much of this element. It is likely to get either eliminated depending on the format, or possibly just become a plain Word document. Now, while this happens, what we, a few recommendations would be to avoid using anything which is extensive tables or sections within the resume, and use the text as much as possible, a uniform text throughout the resume, and avoid anything which is extremely fancy or changes track at each of the sections. The other aspect is you would see a lot of resumes these days have graphics as well as charts, career graphs, and elements like that. But all of those are going to get eliminated as the ATS reads. And more importantly, at times, there are elements within those aspects that you would have covered which get missed out by the ATS and are not as easily extractable as it would be if it is a more basically done resume for yourself. Let's move to the next section with that. The second aspect is, of course, the format that you use. Many of us have been recommended all kinds of formats, but it's always important that we keep in mind that whether you look at a job that is, let's say, on an Indeed or one of the leading job boards, or it is LinkedIn, or if it is even in the career site of any of the organizations that you're applying for, each one of these, as you go into the application mode, redirects you to their ATS, right? And you fill out an application form in addition to uploading your resume. More often than not, most of these places does prescribe what is the format in which they accept a resume. But if it doesn't, a safer way to assume would be that you use a Word document, .x format, which kind of will most of the new as well as the old ATS accept. Avoid doing PDF. More often than not, PDFs are not they do not go through. into the systems. Even if you are ending up sending it to a candidate, recruiter, they will have difficulty in uploading that resume onto their application tracking system, and that kind of just creates delay for you. So it's always good to have a PDF format with you, but as far as your applications are concerned or sending it out is concerned, preferably use the .docs format. Vivek, anything you would like to add here?
Yeah, on the PDF part versus DOS, while PDF is a universally accepted file format, the reason why we are saying PDF is not a preferred format for uploading is because mostly because of this HR systems and the older HR systems, which uses an older ATS systems which have not upgraded yet, have difficulty in parsing the latest versions of PDF. Otherwise, just slightly counter to what we are also recommended is docx format. .pdf is also fine. Normally, the new gen ATSs and new gen properties we are fully able to extract information. But again, it does have difficulties, and the ease with which it will get information out of docx is not exactly the same with PDF. There are several instances where we were, because of that picture element and all those things, taking some sections flowing over and all those things, those files were not correctly interpreted. So yeah, just wanted to add that. Go on, Monica.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next slide now. Yes, this is something that we kind of spoke about, that 75% of the job applications, of course, get rejected at the ATS itself because of incorrect resume formatting or other reasons that we've covered so far. Yeah. Now, this is something I think, with just how the job market has been and how much of awareness has been in general in the candidate market as well. By now, all of you know the essence and how essential keywords within your resumes are. And as happens in any search environment, even in the ATS segment, as well as when recruiters are hunting for suitable candidates, it is a keyword-driven search that leads them to your resume, or when you apply to a job, what the ATS is looking through your resume to kind of do the match to the job. The keywords are really important. And from that point of view, as we were talking about how you design the format of your resume, the other is what is the content within your resume. It's really important that, while I would come to the ATA keywords part of it, but also talk about a few other elements within the resume making, which are essential. Vivek was talking about the roles and responsibilities, the brief summary of your resume and elements of those kinds. So it's really important to bring out all that you've done in your career, but at the same time, depending on how many years of experience do you have, whether it's 5 or 15, that you're able to do a concise version of your experience and really highlight to the core elements of what your project experience has been, the various technologies that you've used, the career journey that you've had, in case you're managing people, elements of those kind, but be able to build that into the relevant sections within your resume. But also when it comes to, technology jobs, it really is also about, apart from all of this, clearly the technologies that you've used and how much depth of experience do you have having used those technologies, and to the years that you have used those technologies. And this kind of comes through in the way you have kind of chosen to describe your work experience. So for instance, many a time, if we are talking about a data analyst, for instance, a job which is listed as data analyst, it would be common sense to say that data analysis also kind of leads to the same, but with the conscious awareness of everything that Vivek kind of spoke to you about. One of the aspects also to note is that we would recommend that you'd rather use, if it's a data analyst job or a front-end engineer job or a full stack engineer job, that you use these relevant keywords than the near about keywords in your resume in terms of how you are framing the experience. One of the other aspects also to keep in mind is, for instance, there will be many things that you will use while mentioning technologies or education or related aspects, which are, for instance, abbreviations or full forms. Our recommendation is there's always this trade-off of, do I use, let's say, for instance, as an example, Master of Business Administration on my resume, or should I just state it as an MBA? Now, whether it is this example or anything else that you would key into your resume, our recommendation is that you use the full form and have the information with regards to the short form of it or the abbreviation of it in brackets right next to this word, all right? So that irrespective of whether it is a candidate, a recruiter or an ATS that's looking at this resume, they're able to translate what you're trying to say. Many times, maybe the abbreviations are not read appropriately. And in other scenarios, maybe the full forms wouldn't be. So a safer bet would be to have both next to each other. But also be mindful of using the most relevant keywords, and a queue of this would come to you from the job itself. And almost all of you would be applying to job descriptions first, reviewing the job description, and then choosing to apply for the job. And that job description will give you a queue of what is the job titled as, what is the core responsibility or technology experience that that job is looking for. And you can always kind of customize your resume further to that, keeping that in mind. Let's move to the next slide. So this is an important element, and I will kind of ask Vivek's inputs in a bit here. But it's also important, as much as we've said that you've got to watch out for keywords and how and where you use them. But at the same time, it's also important to understand that just because we were talking about the fact that the ATSs and the recruiters search via the keywords into the relevance of it in your resumes, not to over-optimize on it, which means do not just use them overtly and in every section possible. That's important that that doesn't happen. And with regards to one other aspect, which is your years of experience, for instance, if you have mentioned in a particular job that you worked in a particular company A as a Java developer, let's say, for instance, for 5 years, automatically the ATS reads that aspect as you having experience in Java for 5 years, right? But if you do not have a similar title, but you have worked in Java in company B as well in your experience, it's really important to kind of emphasize that, not in form of title, but in the description that you've written about the technologies used, for it to kind of extract that information and read it as such. Many a time candidates tend to mention in the job, each of the experience sections about the kind of technologies they've used, but sometimes they would not necessarily do that and kind of put it in the technology skills section and just mention something that you worked on as one of the technologies in that section as just a word there. Now, an ATS is possibly going to read that as just that's one of the things that you've done, and without having a corresponding experience mentioned around it, it is likely to just attribute an average of 6 months of experience, right? Versus reading through an experience section of a particular job where you've had high tenure and you mentioning a similar skill. Vivek, anything on this one that you would like to add, as well as the previous section?
Yeah, there are a couple of points, just taking cue of one of the points which you made, Monica, in the previous slide was regarding use of keywords and specifically the full form and the short form abbreviation of that degrees of different even in Microsoft, like it's not just in degrees and all those things, even in Microsoft Office and MS Office, this is a abbreviated form of this one. O365 is another way you're talking. We started writing our experience in Office. I'm just taking an example. In case of React or Angular, we can just leave it at Angular, or include the icon of Angular. A lot of people do that to make their resumes to stand out to visually. We do use the icon of Angular or something like that. But unfortunately, just leaving at that particular point is not going to extract that full text. Second, we have been saying it's not just about matching and all. This also enables recruiters to do a search on a resume. So do understand, recruiters are going to search for keywords. If one recruiter can search the keywords such as masters, other recruiter would search for MBA, because we are not stopping. It's a human interaction. People use software differently. So you have masters, someone is doing only MBA, someone is doing business administration, and to make sure that we actually get full advantage of appearing on the search, that particular search result, is use what Monica just recommended, right? Masters of business administration and MBA both. It means that your resume is now super searchable, just like making it Google SEO oriented for our URLs, right? So it becomes fully indexed with MBA, becomes a keyword as well, in which people, if they search, they will get your resume on top. Regarding this particular side, over optimizing, while stuffing your keywords, it's absolutely okay. I will give one practical example in which it's absolutely okay to repeat the skill set over a period of, if you have 8 years of experience and the first 2 years you spent in doing Angular JS 1.5, write down Angular JS 1.5. When you moved on to the next 2 years, in which you are doing Angular 4, do mention Angular 4, Angular JS 4. It's all right to repeat Angular with each experience, is what I'm saying, in different sections. But if you again use the same thing on your summary section, I coded in Angular, I coded in that company, you again are summarizing the same thing in a different way. You are repeating Angular most of the time. That's where your Angular, the importance to that particular keyword of Angular is going to go down. It will bring down the rank in that particular case. And this is a general way of ranking as, and I'm not saying that all, like more often, since this is done through machines, this is done through an AI or a statistical model, everyone is going to normalize that particular number of occurrences. Lastly, on the dates, I'm talking from personal experience on the building and seeing the data of how exactly data gets stored. The mentioning of your work experience and the year duration which you are doing from when to when is slightly important, in case you don't want to miss out on the experience part of matching. The reason for that is, if you don't give the experience in a legible way, that what exactly you are doing or when did you do it, when did you work here, when did you work there, if you don't mention that particular duration, a lot of time it gets a null and a null value, which is essentially a blank value there. And when you search against this particular things that, hey, I want to know how much experience this particular candidate has, you will understand that let's assume that we have 3 work sections, work histories. First work history, we don't mention the date. Second onwards, we start mentioning the dates. So for a career of over 10 years, let's say we started writing instead of from 2012 as the first work history, we start mentioning it as 2016. Now, what will happen is, we do a programmatic way of figuring out how many total years of experience you have. We take the minimum of the date in the work history sections and the maximum of the date, and we simply subtract it. But while doing so, we missed out on your initial one, right? As in, we will not be confident. So even though you have 8 years of experience, just because you did not mention a date in your resume, your chances of getting selected based on years of experience matching will go down. It will be cross-verified with what we write on our summary section. But again, summary is a summary, but the detail section is single source of truth for anyone. Like, if you are written in details, that's what is getting summarized on top as well. So we will more often than not go by the details which you are providing rather than the summary section. So yeah, over to you. This is how we optimize to make sure, don't what I'm trying to also say is, let's not get into too much of over optimizing or thinking that whether it will get selected or not. Do mention it. Be just like you would have read your resume. When you get a resume from your friend or from someone else, go through the resume and figure out, you will get a feel that whether this resume is right resume or not, and just use the same. Someone writing React.js 10 times, you yourself, any human is going to say, hey, this guy is just mentioning React just for the heck of it. So that's what optimization, and there's no need of over optimizing as well, in which you don't mention, you mention React only once type, that actually is not going to help you either. So be true and keep the information concise. That's the whole point.
Sure. Thanks, Vivek. Let's move to the next slide now. On similar terms, as we were talking about over optimizing on keywords, is also about tricking the ATS with the significant knowledge now of the fact that it's really the ATS first and then the recruiter. It also would make you think about what all to do to kind of go through this first layer of filter. And by virtue of that, again, thanks to the internet, there would be many other aspects of what you can optimize for as against also the things that we've shared with you so far. And many a time we've seen instances where there are recommendations to potentially, let's say for instance, there is an X job description that you're applying against. One of the hacks that is often spoken about on the internet is with regards to just copy pasting significant text within the job description in a non-recognizable font color within the resume, assuming that, okay, this is not going to be read by a human eye, but it kind of definitely helps in the search, keyword search, or search within the multiple applicants that will be there, and put you up in the top of the pile. But that doesn't necessarily happen because, as we've already established, that all recruiters are using some shape or form of technology to sieve through the applicants. And an ATS, irrespective of the font color or font type, is going to be able to read all text on the other side of the application tracking system in same shape and form, right? So it's really important that that is not done. Also, for instance, as a recruiter eventually is going to look at this resume, and this discovery of having done something of this nature will automatically leave not the appropriate impression that you would want to kind of portray as an applicant to any job, because that basically kind of just translates to an assumption even by a recruiter that you are looking at going to any extent to kind of get your application through. And it kind of just, even before the journey of getting forward in this particular application process forward, it kind of already puts you on the back foot. So we would definitely recommend that the knowledge of how ATSs work and how possibly to optimize for keywords should not necessarily translate to doing something like this, because this definitely would be a futile move, right? Let's move on to the next section, and Vivek, in the interim, anything that you want to add on this aspect?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, even to the extent of adding extra information in metadata of your file. A lot of technical people tend to do that, but understand that all these things are going through a machine, which is the AI, which is sitting there. Doesn't matter what font we are using, doesn't matter if you have written it in metadata, if you are storing it as a subsection, subfooter, footer section, it absolutely doesn't matter. If there is a occurrence of this particular aspect where we are hiding the text behind the background color and all those things, it's going to be normalized anyways. But the only thing, and may put certain people at advantage over others, but as Monica said, that the moment it goes to the human interaction level, the whole point of doing this actually goes for a toss. We will lose credibility right away, because that's in a way is called gaming the system or cheating the system, which leaves a very, very bad impression with the recruiter, not even with the hiring manager. It's gets disqualified at the recruiter level itself. So yeah, let's move on to the next one, Monica.
Right. Now, this is an often asked question and often wondered question by many anybody that's attempting to kind of start creating the resume, that how do you capture your experience? Should you go with your latest experience first or your first experience first, right? But it's always kind of recommended that you start with in the reverse chronology, which is your current or the latest experience first, going back to possibly your first experience. So that's always the recommended format. That's how most recruiters, hiring managers would prefer to read it, as well as that's how the most relevancy to a job application also kind of comes through, because you're likely to have done more in-depth work in your years as you progress through your career. So it's always recommended to go with the reverse chronology of capturing your experience. The other aspect that tends to happen is that while, if not the reverse chronology that you're using, sometimes it's recommended, and people tend to use a section called as a summary section, where you're kind of bunching together all of your accomplishments, all of your key experiences, while maybe at the bottom of the page, you've still kind of mentioned employer 1, employer 2, employer 3, employer 4, but you have kind of summarized your entire accomplishment and key experience section into one. Now, that's an absolute no-no. It is recommended for you to not do that. Rather, mention your experience in chronology, and each one of your experiences kind of talk about what have been the accomplishment or the key experience or responsibilities that you had with that particular job. Again, both in terms of how a recruiter views it as well as an application tracking system views it, this would be a more methodical way of going about it. The other aspect is also with regards to the length of experience that we spoke about earlier, and we kind of mentioned that as well, that both the versions of technologies that you've used, it's important that that comes out in the way you captured your experience, and not just the generic versions of the tech stack references that you're using. At the same time, when it comes to, let's say section headers, so you're talking about your qualification, you're talking about your professional experience. Many a time, of course, there is a more fancier way of being able to say it. For instance, if you're talking about qualifications, and you could just say what degrees I have, or, something more flowery and which is, more language appropriate, it might seem. But at the end of it, whether it's a recruiter or an ATS in this case, which is the first filter that's using it, the most obvious ones would be the best way to go. So you rather mention your professional experience as professional experience. When it comes to your qualification, just mention qualification. If you're capturing personal details, just say personal details, rather than, overtly emphasizing on these and stating it differently, because most others tend to state it in the general form. But the general basic form of, stating it would be the better way to do it. Both with regards to how an ATS views it, and eventually how the resume kind of comes through when it gets to a recruiter. Vivek, anything that you would like to add here?
Yeah, I wanted to add one example here of chronological order. Actually, we do use the exact dates. A lot of people also use exact dates in mentioning that I worked from, let's say, 2nd of February 2020 to let's say 5th of March 2021. Now the problem there is, while it's a good practice, always a good practice, but also when we are applying for a particular company, make sure that your dates are in recognizable format. It's absolutely okay to diverse just the month and the year information there from month year to month year. That was much more, and that to words like Jan 2020 to March 2021 kind of thing, rather than saying 011, like using this particular format, primarily because as we will see that we keep applying for US based jobs as well, European based jobs, and the date format everywhere is different. Some conceive as 11 conceives as first, of course 11 will be considered as 1st January everywhere, but if we are saying 1st February in India, it would be written as 1/2/2022, but 1st of February in US will be 2/1/2022, which will be conceived as 2nd January 2022 in India. So there are, understand where exactly you are, that company is located as well. It's good to do some research on company's location too. More often than not, there is a centralized ATS, which is hosted. If it is a US based company, most likely it's going to use the US based date format. And the safest thing is just mention the month and the year together. Even if you skip the date, even if you use the date, just use the month as -month, three digits, 3 alphabet months, and the year. So that is the most safest way of mentioning your experience, so that there is zero confusion on what exactly when you started and when you ended. Of course, last point there in chronology is also ATSs don't like, we don't go by days. Like if you have joined in the mid of month, doesn't really matter. Like 15 days doesn't really matter actually. So normally even the ATSs also take it month over month. Like if you have written 15 January 2022 to 15 January 2021, we take from Jan 2020 to Jan 2021. It doesn't matter if it's 15 or 31st January there. So it does matter if the month changes from February. So, but yeah, so it's all right to write 1st of month everywhere. It's absolutely fine. But yeah, just wanted to add this couple of points.
Sure. Thanks, Vivek. Now, while we are at that, with regards to chronology of events that you want to capture or experience that you want to capture on your resume, but there are a few other elements also that, to Vivek's point, that I would like to add. One aspect is, as we were talking about dates, it's really important that, you pay conscious time and effort towards this section. Many a time, not because of any other reason, it's not intentional, but unintentionally, you might not capture the sequence appropriately. So it would not be absolute chronology. So you kind of mentioned your last 2 experiences in order, and then you missed something, and the order kind of goes not as much as a chronology, reverse chronology eventually. So it's really important to pay attention that if you decide to put, let's say you've been with 3 organizations, it is actually the latest one now, the previous one after, and the first one at the very last. And that order, as well as the corresponding dates, have been appropriately used. At times, just by paying attention to detail, you could have, or lack of it, you could have mentioned a 2020 as 2021 or otherwise. And when the system is trying to read this, it can get confused, as well as the recruiters, when they're trying to read this, they can get confused. Also, when there are gaps in your experience, it's perfectly okay to not necessarily cover up for those gaps, because this kind of in form of your resume then becomes the actual inputs that you've given as your experience, and then that becomes a record of verification through the application tracking system even when you eventually get selected. So it's really important, if there have been gap years or gap months, that it's perfectly okay, leave those date instances out, or in certain cases you can also mention the gap period and possibly just a reason behind it, or not, even if you do not intend to, it's just leave out that period of your resume rather than having to cover it within the dates, because then it kind of implies incorrectly as to what your actual tenure in some of those firms was. The other aspect is, wherever possible, of course, use bulleting appropriately, and do not kind of trend to using table formats to kind of make more legible reading of your experience the way it is. Another aspect is with regards to personal details, often whether to mention, not to mention. And from a both application tracking system point of view and what potential employers are looking at it, the basic contact information is what's essential, which is your phone number, email ID, and the location that you are in. Those would be the three essential thing. Anything else, it's kind of not necessarily an essential. And the personal details section in that sense is, in that shape and form, a little redundant. Most applications will anyway ask you to key in this information. And while they're asking you to key in this information, it's good to carry this in some place in your resume as well, which is your phone number, email ID, and the location, basically the address. Let's move on to the next slide, please. All right, this is something that we've obviously spoken through right now in terms of using your most recent experience first, but this is
I just wanted to add here, Monica, that you already said about clear section, simple and clear section titles here. This is an example where while not the most wonderful example of how a resume should look like, but the essence of this is to make sure that our sections and titles are clearly called out, and mostly in industry specific term. Let's not say qualification as degrees achieved or something like that. It actually the parsers and all those things goes for a toss in that particular aspect. So again, this is not about, parsers are also evolving, but it will take some time, and we do not want to lose out on that opportunity, that we are simply using some different words which could have been put in more simpler way. So keep it simple, keep the English simple, keep any language, whichever language you are writing your resume in, as simple as possible in grammar and uses of the words as well.
Sure. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I just covered that. Yeah.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is something that we kind of have spoken about. So next slide, please. Yeah. This is again, a lot of job applicants tend to kind of share this as a best practice among each other. And there is always a question that, by customizing your resume, if you're in the wrong of doing that, but it's also important to kind of understand this in the true translation of what we mean by customizing your resume for each application. So for instance, you could be a full stack engineer and there could be a front-end engineer's job listed, and you're really still keen to apply for it, considering the employer it is and the roles and responsibilities that are mentioned. In that kind of a scenario, what we're basically saying is that you can over-index, overemphasize on that part of your experience versus your overall experience necessarily, rather than coming across as a generalist, coming across as a specialist. The other aspect that also tends to happen is with regards to, like just this example, if you're looking at each of the job description, your experience fits that job description. To that extent, customizing, but not necessarily doing what we spoke about, to trick the system by actually extracting the information from the job description and capturing that experience in your resume. Here we are saying, present your experience in the most relevant fashion to the job description that you're applying to, or to the particular job that you're applying to, so that as the application tracking system kind of assesses your suitability to that job, that kind of comes through versus a generically written resume, which could again then be generalized in terms of the assessment when it comes to an ATS, or even when eventually the recruiter is viewing that. Yeah. So another stat here, 63% of recruiters say that not tailoring your resume to the role will get the application rejected. Let's move on to the next section. And at this stage, I see that there are a few questions in the chat window. We'll quickly take those on, and we're also almost at time. So here, one of the first questions that I see here is it recommended to mention our level of expertise in a programming language like beginner, intermediate, advanced in JavaScript? My answer from a recruiting lens would be yes. It's important that you mention it, but at the same time, do not be too conservative or too aggressive in that assessment of how much you have, what your expertise level is, and you can always translate that one by, let's say, for instance, you mention it as advanced expertise in JavaScript, and then say having worked XYZ number of years in XYZ, places of where you've kind of worked, right? Vivek, anything you would like to add there?
No, you have covered it. Don't just one point, don't put those graphs and everything representing the expertise, because that will neither get passed in the resumes no one will be able to, like, visually it may make sense, but again, the rating scale which you are rating 3 on 5 or something, we really don't know what 5 is. So it's always used better. It's a good suggestion actually to use phrases like beginner, intermediate, or advanced in JavaScript. So yeah, go ahead and use it, not through graphical representation.
Okay, and at that point, I just also want to interject. We do have a couple of polls. So firstly, thank you so much, Monica and Vivek. Very, very insightful session on 2 very important ends. So Venkatesh, if you could just launch the first poll while we still wait for more questions that can come in. So if people can tell us what is the most difficult part of writing a resume? Is it writing about your skills, formatting it the right way, making it impactful while keeping it concise, or any other? Please comment in the chat box. We'll keep this open for about 15 seconds. And if you can also, any other questions that you might have, please feel free to put them into the chat box.
I see another question coming in, which is, what is the ideal resume length, and should we strictly stick to 1 page? So again, here, there isn't necessarily an ideal length of a resume. Again, country to country, the way this gets viewed is different. However, a generalized, what kind of most relevant in most regions would be to have it not more than let's say, for instance, if you have a 15+ years of experience, not have anything more than a 3-pager. But if you're anybody within the, let's say, the 5-year to the 12 years experience bracket, it's quite possible to have your resume as a 2-pager. So the recommendation is, as far as possible, have a 2-pager and not have more than that length as the resume. If you have it in 1, that's fabulous. But a whole lot of time, if you're finding it difficult to kind of mention everything meaningfully in 1 page, it's okay to be having a 2-page resume. But I would recommend that a 2-page resume would be good to go. You don't necessarily always need to try and get it down to a 1-page.
There's another question: how to overcome age bias if I am 45+ and learned new relevant technologies? Tips on making resume.
Yeah, Vivek, if you would like to take that.
Yeah. So first, overcome age bias. So one thing which we have been saying, customize your resume for that particular job. If you have relevant experience for that particular technical skills, or you have updated yourself, mention that. Once that is mentioned, it doesn't really, as your total job experience should not matter. Your relevant experience, we understand that what exactly relevant experience is there. And even from recruiter's lens, even if it is manually going through a particular parsing, you will get a better chance at an interview. So just make that resume more relevant on how many years of experience, or even if you are at beginner level on that specific technology and you are interested, show that interest by applying and updating your resume with that particular skill set.
Yes, and since we're actively in this space looking for jobs, if you can cue the next poll, please, which is about that specific question of how many people are actually looking for jobs right now. So if you could launch the next poll. To the participants, we just have a couple more minutes of time with our panelists before we go into the next session. So if you have any pressing question that you might want to ask, please, feel free to chat it. Snehal has asked, Snehal, you've asked about, it is difficult to get a job as a fresher. It would help to have a little bit more context if you're applying from a specific angle, specific kind of job role. But if there's broader advice that our panelists might have.
Yeah, I do have one for the Snehal. Talk about freshers. It's really hard to get job in development. The thing is, we will cover on how to ace an interview and how to get into a at least get a call from a particular job in upcoming session. I think Sharmita is going to lead that. She can definitely help with more points on how to make yourself more what you call as selectable and preferred by hitting the right chords on what kind of interview you're doing and how to answer those questions. But from resume perspective, see the resume perspective, if you have done clearly call out your certifications, clearly call out your any projects which you have done in different sections, which will make sure that your resume gets selected at the first place for a specific job. So that's how at least the first level can be cleared by making, even at fresher level, don't simply dump everything in one place and think that it will get selected. Try to format, as said, in one page your resume, just try to format all your experience or projects which you have done, personal projects, your what you call as educational projects, academic projects which you have done, and what kind of technologies you have touched is something which is better. To the extent of, I'll give one hint that to the extent that if you have, as part of computer science, if you have done some worked on specific algorithms, something like backtracking or something like that, it's okay to mention that in resume. We have another question from Ashish. From software engineering point of view, while writing work experience, is it recommended to mention numerical figures frequently, like improved compile time of something to under 200 millisecond? Does ATS gives higher score to resumes which have such numbers present in them? Answer is, you should mention this as an achievement if you are actually improving the compile time of something, as and that should come under the sections of your work accomplishments or something like that. The numbers are definitely helpful, not for getting the initial screening done, but in the subsequent rounds, where by writing this kind of numbers, you will lead the interviewer to ask about it, that what exactly did you do to do that, and hence you are in a way influencing the recruiter, influencing the hiring manager, the interviewer, to ask questions which you are an expert on already. So you are playing on your strengths at that point in time. So for ATS will not take care of this kind of information that you have improved compile time. But if there is a job description which says that whether there is a compile time needed, and then definitely this will come up as a match that someone has written something about compile time reduction. I can mention Edureka certification. It will help me in resume. Absolutely. I told you, I have repeating again, if you have done any certification, there's no point in hiding that. Make sure that you write a section called as certifications, and inside that, just put that certification details on what you have done, and probably highlight the skills as well, that what are the skills which you have learned. Those are the keywords which will give you a better chance in getting a higher rank in the initial stages. Deepak. Yeah, sorry. Kurt.
No, it's Vivek. I was just saying that we're coming up to a time. We're about.
Yeah. So let me answer this last question from Deepak. Just wanted to know if resume consists of all the details, relevant project URLs, technologies which are completed in time, it might be 5-6 pages. So again, this is a tricky situation. While we can always compile if it is coming even for 10 years or 11 years of experience. The resume length, ideal resume length should not be more than 3 pages. Even for a recruiter, if you're manually seeing this, people actually go through the first 2 pages and then drop off. Like they just lose interest in reading the rest of the history. Make it concise. Try to summarize what exactly has been achieved. And even with URLs and all those things, you can mention it as facts. You don't have to give the entire description of that project and then the URL. Just try to summarize something like if you have worked on an integration in React.js, or we have developed a web component which was independently deployed with Angular in place. Just say that instead of saying this whole thing which I said, just say that deployment of React and Angular in the same container was done. So that would make more sense.